Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back to another episode of Jumah Nights. The month of Imam al-Hussein is now here, and we have responsibilities towards Imam al-Hussein. Imam al-Hussein left his land in order to seek reform in the nation of his grandfather and to walk the path of Ali ibn Abi Talib. For us, this Husseini reform must begin with ma'rifah and with knowledge. As Imam Ali says, "O Kumail, there is no motion that you take except that you require ma'rifah within it." And in order to start this journey and to embody our response to the call of Imam al-Hussein on the day of Ashura, we would like to start with an examination of the books of Ahadith to increase our ma'rifah. Labbayka ya Hussein. I want to take this opportunity therefore to welcome you to our new series where we'll be discussing some of the classical books of Hadith so we can increase our familiarization with these books, why they were written, who they were written by, and we can understand further the knowledge of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam and use that in conjunction with the fire in our hearts this Muharram to move towards the long-term aim of Imam al-Hussein on the day of Ashura, which was to prepare us for the coming of his grandson, Imam Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman. So we'd like to begin this series by discussing the book of al-Kulayni, al-Kafi. And this book is one of the most important primary books of Hadith that we have as Shi'a. When we look at all of the books classically of Hadith, this is the one that shines like the moon amongst stars. And we're going to discuss why that is through many reasons today. But before we get into the contents of the book, we need to spend some time to look into the author of this book and understanding his life and how he came about to write this book. His name was Mohamed ibn Yaqub al-Kulayni. The compiler of the book al-Kafi, Abu Ja'far Mohamed ibn Yaqub al-Kulayni, was born in the beginning of the second half of the 3rd century. So he was born in between around 250 after Hijrah to 260 after Hijrah. Some of the historians have mentioned a specific year, which is 255 after Hijrah, but there doesn't seem to be much evidence with regards to that. But what we can understand for sure is that he was born in between these 10 years, between the year 250 after Hijrah to 260 after Hijrah. As for the year of his death, there is difference of opinion amongst the scholars. There is one opinion that says that he died in the year 328 after Hijrah, while another opinion says that he died in the year 329 after Hijrah. Upon the research that I have depended on from the scholars that I have depended on, it seems that the stronger opinion is that he died in the year 328 after Hijrah. And this is important because it shows that Sheikh al-Kulayni lived during the time of the first ghaiba, or as we usually call it in the Shi'a culture, al-Ghaibat al-Sughra, which was the minor occultation in which the 4 deputies of Imam Sahib al-Zaman were still active and were alive and there at the time. Of course, we're going to speak about this in some detail later, but it's important to note that al-Kulayni lived during the first ghaiba and he died before the 4th representative of Imam Sahib al-Zaman, which was as-Samari, who died in Sha'ban in the year 329 after Hijrah. Sheikh al-Kulayni was born in a small town called Kulain, which falls into the region at the time called Ray. So for those of you who have been to Tehran, the place where there is the grave of Shah Abdul Azim is in that area that Sheikh al-Kulayni would have been born. He was the son of a scholar called Yaqub al-Kulayni, who is buried in Kulain and was known to be one of the great scholars of Kulain. Al-Kulayni lived his life in multiple places. So he started his life and his journey into studying Islam in Ray itself, where he narrated from and he studied with who is speculated to be his brother Ishaq ibn Yaqub al-Kulayni and another individual called Abil Hassan al-Asadi and many other scholars who are from Ray. After this, after a short period of time, he moved to the city of Qum, where he went there to meet some of the companions of Imam al-Askari or those who directly narrated from Imam al-Askari alayhi salatu wasalam. After he moves to Qum, you can see that he narrates from some of the great mashayikh of Qum. We see him narrate from the likes of Ahmad ibn Idris al-Qummi, and we see him narrate from Ali ibn Ibrahim al-Qummi, who he narrates more than 4,000 hadith from in al-Kafi. Ali ibn Ibrahim al-Qummi was also a great scholar of hadith, and we know his book of Tafsir al-Qummi, or also known as Tafsir Ali ibn Ibrahim, or also known as Tafsir al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam. So we see that he learnt from many of these great scholars in Qum. So we can see that al-Kulayni was really in and among some of the great mashayikh of his time and some of the people that narrated directly from the Imams alayhi salatu wasalam. So he lived in a time that was really close to the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Following his study in the city of Qom, he eventually moved to Baghdad, where he passed away. There aren't exact years to know when exactly Shaykh al-Kulayni moved from Qom to Baghdad, but there are speculations with regards to it. There are two opinions. There are the opinions that say that Shaykh al-Kulayni moved to Baghdad and he carried on writing al-Kafi, because al-Kafi was a book that he wrote over 20 years. And there are those who say that he moved to Baghdad in the latter years of his life, where he only spent 2 years there. And they say that he had already finished writing al-Kafi by this time. From the scholars that I've depended on their research, it seems that the stronger opinion is that he moved to Baghdad and he was still writing al-Kafi. And some of the later stuff in the episode will further indicate that as we go on. It's also mentioned in the Faharis, in the books that have indexes of books that were written by specific individuals, that we could see that Shaykh al-Kulayni had multiple books. He had other books as well. For example, he had Kitab al-Rasail, he had Kitab Rad al-Qaramita, Ta'bir al-Ru'ya, but none of these books reached us except for Kitab al-Kafi. But it seems really interesting how Shaykh al-Kulayni ended up compiling al-Kafi, because as we've mentioned, this was a 20-year ordeal. It took him 20 years to write this book that is in front of me. He traveled from Ray to Qom and to Baghdad in order to compile and bring together all of the narrations he needed in order to write these books. The second thing we need to get through after having that basic overview with regards to al-Kulayni, the author, is how was this book actually compiled? Shaykh al-Kulayni was known to be a genius and was known to be one of the grand fuqaha of the Shi'a. Even some of the books of the mukhalifin, of the opposing sects, actually attest to this with regards to Shaykh al-Kulayni. Shaykh al-Kulayni, he goes through this 20-year journey of writing al-Kafi. He moves from Ray to Qom, then eventually to Baghdad. When he moves to Baghdad, Baghdad is the center or the capital of Tashayyu. We see that all of the authentic books, all the classical and most authentic books of the Shi'a are present in Baghdad at that time. They are present in the libraries, in the houses of the Shi'a. And of course, as we've also mentioned in previous episodes, the 400 usul, the 400 famous usul that were written by the companions, which are basically scrolls or little books that were written with the narrations of the Imams within them. The 400 usul that existed at the time would have also been available in Baghdad when Shaykh al-Kulayni went there. It's also important to note that at this point, the books had not yet been burnt or been distorted in any capacity. So therefore, Shaykh al-Kulayni actually had access to all of the books that would have been written. We spoke about this in our previous series with regards to ghulu, where we mentioned that a lot of the ahadith that were compiled into our classical books, like al-Kafi, like al-Ghaybat al-Nu'mani, were actually made from the 400 usul, and they were dependent on these 400 usul. And as we mentioned, Shaykh al-Kulayni, through his journeys, would have met many different scholars. He would have met many different shuyukh that were narrating the ahadith of Ahl al-Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. Using the book al-Kafi, based on the research of some of the scholars, they've come to the conclusion that Shaykh al-Kulayni relies on, at the very least, at a minimum, he relies on 200 different sources for the hadith that he collected in al-Kafi. And it may be that the number is actually much higher than that. What is known and what can be proven for sure is that he used at the very least 200 sources. And we can see that that means that Shaykh al-Kulayni made it a point to actually journey and find these shuyukh in order to be able to collect all of these ahadith into al-Kafi. Some of the scholars say that this sheer number of sources that he used, like 200 sources, is not little at that time, especially when we don't live in the time of the internet, right? Those times they have to actually travel and find these books and find the people that had those books. So 200 sources is a lot. Some of the scholars say that this sheer number in itself is enough to indicate that Shaykh al-Kulayni spent longer time in Baghdad than is previously speculated, which is only 2 years. And they say that in order for him to have access to such a large number of sources, he would have only been able to do that in Baghdad. But on the other hand, of course, there are those who argue that he narrated a lot from the scholars of Qom, and there were major muhaddithin in Qom as well, and he may have used sources from there as well. Another example that may indicate that he would have lived in Baghdad for a longer period of time is the description that the historians have given to Shaykh al-Nu'mani, who was the writer of al-Ghayba, which we'll be speaking about next week, inshallah. We see in the description of al-Nu'mani that he's mentioned to have been one of the people that helped al-Kulayni in compiling al-Kafi massively. He helped him in compiling the narrations, in writing the narrations, and some of the descriptions even describe him as the scribe of al-Kulayni. Some of the historians also report that al-Nu'mani would have moved to Baghdad in the years between 313 after Hijrah to 315 after Hijrah. And that would have been where he met Sheikh al-Kulayni, although there is speculation that he also may have met him before in Qom. However, we can see in the books of history that Sheikh al-Kulayni and Sheikh al-Nu'mani had a very good relationship, where Sheikh al-Nu'mani was massively integral in compiling this book. And some of the scholars have taken that as an indicator to say that this would have been mainly possible in the city of Baghdad, and that's why they believe that Sheikh al-Kulayni may have spent longer in Baghdad than is previously speculated, which is just 2 years. You might be wondering why I'm banging on about Baghdad so much. The reason for this is because Baghdad at that point was the center of Shi'ism for a reason. The reason was that in the year 279 after Hijrah, the deputy of Imam Sahib al-Zaman would have moved his office from Samarra to Baghdad. So that meant that al-Kulayni, when he was in Baghdad, was in the same city as the deputy of the Imam of our time. This obviously raises the possibility that it was in his capacity to be able to speak to them, to be able to get advice from them, to be able to get help from them with regards to how to compile this book and how to make the structure for this book. Although it remains a possibility, it is a strong one. When we look at the introduction of al-Kulayni in his book, it seems that there are individuals that have helped him in writing this book. Some of them that we know and some of them that we don't. And of course, we're going to speak about this a little bit later as well. However, it is important to note there are those that say that he would have already finished writing al-Kafi when he reached Baghdad. And the reason they give for that is they say that Sheikh al-Kulayni did not narrate directly from any of the 4 deputies, and that is the reason that they give. However, of course, that is also just a matter of speculation. Now moving on to the context in which this book was written. Sheikh al-Kulayni, of course, as we mentioned, lived during the first Ghaiba. And the first Ghaiba was somewhat a time of tribulations and trials for the Shia that were living at the time. Some people were really confused about the occultation. Some people had lost faith in Imam Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman. When Sheikh al-Kulayni writes this book, he compiles some ahadith in it that actually act as a proof for Shi'ism and the understanding of the Ghaiba. You may ask how. Sheikh al-Kulayni has actually collected the hadith in al-Kafi with regards to both Ghaibas. He mentions a hadith from Imam Sadiq ﷺ mentioning that there will be a first Ghaiba and a second Ghaiba of the Qa'im. Now, of course, if Sheikh al-Kulayni died within the first Ghaiba, then he wouldn't have been there in the second Ghaiba to potentially fabricate that. So that acts as a proof that the second Ghaiba was known even from the time of Imam Sadiq ﷺ. If you examine these chains as well, you can see that these go back further, all the way back to the Imams. So the idea of Ghaiba was one that was already established among the Shi'a. This would mean that if somebody tried to accuse the deputies of Imam Sahib al-Zaman of lying, as some ignorant people even do today, then these narrations would act as proof that actually the Ghaiba was to occur. And with the ending of the first Ghaiba, with the death of the 4th deputy, a summary would be where the major occultation begins, the second occultation begins, which is much longer, which is mentioned in the narrations, and this was all prior to the second occultation. And we see that Sheikh al-Kulayni died before this even happened. So him narrating these ahadith acts as proof of the Ghaiba itself. Sheikh al-Kulayni mentions an individual in his introduction that actually asked him with regards to writing a book like al-Kafi. He mentions that there's a lot of takhlit, there's a lot of mixture with regards to the ahadith where they are contradicting one another, and there is no real book that everybody can return to that is sufficient, kafin, which is the name that that individual says. Sheikh al-Kulayni therefore goes to actually write this book, al-Kafi, in response to the request of that individual. He wanted a book that encompasses all of the knowledge of the religion, that a student could return to and he could learn everything from it. Or if somebody was looking for any matter of the religion, they'd be able to return to this book. And he wanted to return to a book which only contained reliable narrations from the Imams alayhi salatu wassalam. He says, وَقَدْ يَسَّرَ اللَّهُ وَلَهُ الْحَمْدُ تَعْرِيفَ مَا سَأَلْتَ. He says that Allah made it easy upon me to author that which you have requested. A book that has only reliable narrations and a book that contains all of the different sciences of religion with regards to aqa'id, with regards to fiqh, and with regards to philosophy of life. So from here we can see that Sheikh al-Kulayni felt that he met all of these conditions with the book al-Kafi. He felt that this book was sufficient with regards to all of the different knowledge of the religion, and he met all of the requirements of this individual who had asked him to write this book. It seems that this individual who asked Shaykh al-Kulayni to write the book would have been a very important individual. But of course, we can only speculate as to who it might be. With regards to the structure of the book, al-Kafi is written in 8 volumes as per the most well-known publisher. Of course, there are many more publications with regards to it, and they have separated it into different volumes, but the most well-known version of al-Kafi is 8 volumes. The first 2 volumes are known as Usul al-Kafi, which refer to the usul, the aqaid of the Shi'a. And the 2 most important chapters within them are the chapter of At-Tawheed, the book of At-Tawheed, and the book of Al-Hujjah. Needless to say, the book of At-Tawheed and the book of Al-Hujjah discuss the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the status of the Hujjah of Allah upon earth, respectively. He mentions with regards to Kitab al-Hujjah, which was the book with regards to the 14 Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam, he mentions وَوَسَّعْنَا قَلِيلًا كِتَابَ الْحُجَّةِ وَإِن لَمْ نُكَمِّلْهُ عَلَى إِسْتِحْقَاقِهِ. He says that we have expanded a lot on the book of Al-Hujjah, even though we may have not completed it to its due right. We haven't given it its due importance. He carries on in his introduction speaking, and he mentions that he would like to write a book that is more detailed with regards to the Hujjah, and to go into further detail, as he feels like he did not give it its complete due honor in this book. This acts as testament as to the importance that Shaykh al-Kulayni actually gave to the Hujjah and its centrality in the religion. Of course, even if he had written that book, it has not actually reached us, because the only thing that reached us from him was al-Kafi and some bits of al-Rasail. So when we look at these first 2 volumes, particularly the first volume of al-Kafi, it is particularly gold, because the first volume of al-Kafi actually really focuses on the aqaid. It goes through the Tawheed in a lot of depth. It goes through the understanding of the Imam in a lot of depth. So we can actually learn a lot of aqaid from the first volume. While the second volume kind of focuses more upon the understanding of religious concepts and spiritual growth with regards to them. And these 2 first volumes are known as Usul al-Kafi. Then we have volumes 3 to 7, which are referred to as Furu' al-Kafi. These are basically the volumes of al-Kafi that focus upon the ahkam, upon Islamic law and Islamic jurisprudence. So we'll see that there are different chapters within it. The book of prayer, book of fasting, book of zakat, of hajj. All of these kind of chapters are covered within Furu' al-Kafi, where we'll see a lot of narrations that have been compiled with regards to specific ahkam, where we see that Shaykh al-Kulayni compiled a lot of narrations with regards to the ahkam, so that people could use it at the time as a risala amaliyah. They could go through each of these chapters and find narrations from the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam on how to act with regards to Islamic law, with regards to prayers, fasting, and so on. Shaykh al-Kulayni compiled these narrations in such a way that each bab, each chapter, when it speaks about fiqh, it is structured in such a way that each chapter that you finish, you'll walk away with a clear understanding of what the ruling is. And that's why it acted as a Risala Amaliyah at the time in which it was written. Then we have the final volume of Al-Kafi, which is referred to as Rawdatul Kafi. This volume is a volume that brings together a number of different kinds of reports. These narrations discuss the philosophy of life, how we should view life from a perspective of the world and from the perspective of the religion. It uses many different stories from the past, stories of the prophets, stories of the religion at the time of the Imams themselves, and of the future as well, in order that this Rawdatul Kafi acts as a guide as to how we should think about life, how we should philosophize about life with regards to this world and with regards to the religion. So these narrations actually act as a guide as to how we can actually understand the philosophy of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam in understanding the world and the mission of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. As we mentioned, Al-Kafi is amazing in the sense that each chapter that you read, when you look at all of the narrations, if there are 5 or 6 narrations, after you've gone through all of them, you'll walk away with a level of clarity with regards to that specific topic. Some of the scholars have said that this level of clarity is specific to Al-Kafi. There's no other book of hadith that reaches it. There are those scholars who compare, they say like the closest to al-Kulayni's book Al-Kafi are the compilations of Sheikh al-Saduq. But even his books are not as, they don't give you that level of clarity that Shaykh al-Kulayni gives you in Al-Kafi. In terms of the authenticity of the book, al-Kafi is above being praised by someone external because the narrations of Ahlul Bayt ﷺ speak for themselves and the authenticity of the narrations speak for themselves. However, just for the purpose of information, there are many scholars who have praised al-Kafi to a great extent, from the classical and contemporary alike. If we have a look at an attribution of Al-Mirza al-Nuri to Sheikh al-Mufid says al-Kafi is the most honorable books of the Shi'a and the greatest of them in benefit. And we also have a quote that is attributed to Shahid al-Awwal, where he says that al-Kafi is such a book of hadith that it has never been done again in the history of Tashayyuh. So that was the praise of the classical scholars. And in contemporary times, we see from, for example, from Abul Qasim al-Khoi, that he mentions from his teacher, al-Na'ini, that he said that somebody who debates the transmissions of al-Kafi is somebody that he's got nothing better to do with his time, basically. So he was basically saying that the transmissions of al-Kafi were beyond doubt, and that generally speaking, we could take all of the narrations within them to be the narrations of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. As for the benefits of the book, and this is what we're going to end on, it is great to start reading as a beginner, and it's even better if you can read it alongside a commentary. If you're looking to read something in Arabic, then you have the Sharh Usul al-Kafi by al-Mazandarani, which is a great sharh as well as a beginner to be able to go through. And if you're looking for English commentaries, then a great book to look at would be Sheikh Rizwan Arastu's book, where he's started to do a commentary of the first volume of al-Kafi. And I would recommend anybody that wants to get familiar with the book to buy one of these commentaries to actually start getting familiar with the book. The best thing about al-Kafi is that it has narrations about everything. So you have the narrations about aqaid, you have narrations about fiqh, and you have the narrations about how to think about life and how to philosophize about life. So al-Kafi has it all in there. The best thing obviously to do if you're an absolute beginner is to start with a teacher or to go through lessons if you can find them on YouTube. But this book is actually one that will give you a very good basic understanding of the religion, because you'll be able to get through so many different topics and learn so much about the religion through this one book. There are those scholars who say that even if we were to lose all of our hadith books, every single hadith book that we have, if we were to lose it and we were just left with the first volume of al-Kafi, it would be sufficient for us. Some of the scholars have gone to that level of praise for this noble book, al-Kafi, which we refer to as al-Kafi al-Sharif, because this is something that is understood in reality. There's a narration that's attributed to the Imam of our time, alayhi salatu wasalam, where he says that the book al-Kafi is truly kafin li shi'atina, is truly sufficient for all of our Shi'a. Of course, this is a narration that is disputed and is not found in our classical books, but the scholars have said that this meaning is true, that we can actually taste this meaning through living with al-Kafi, through researching al-Kafi. We can actually see that it is actually sufficient. Even if we were to not have any of the other ahadith books, this book would be sufficient, and it truly is kafin li shi'atina. Inshallah, let's use this information to actually encourage ourselves to look into these books, look into these great men who wrote these books of hadith. And of course, I have not given it its justice at all. Sheikh al-Kulayni was someone that was absolutely brilliant and a genius, and somebody that I can't even try and summarize in this short episode and the short time that we had. But this is the greatest book of the Shi'a, and this is one of the most important texts that every single Shi'i should be familiar with and should understand, because it's essential in us increasing in ma'rifah, in increasing towards our journey towards Imam Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman, to reach the aims of Imam al-Hussein in Karbala. Inshallah, I'll see you again next week, where we're going to be discussing the book of Shaykh al-Nu'mani al-Ghayba, and we'll see you again for that next week. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.